Welcome back to the Joy Fueled Resilient Woman podcast. And I'm Dr. Phyllis, your host. I am so excited to share with you today's episode 57, Setting Boundaries, Avoiding Damage Control Before It Starts. Now I'm going to say that again because I want it to kind of sink in. Setting boundaries, avoiding damage control before it starts. And this is important because let me ask you this. Have you ever felt so full? And I say that full in terms of you're so overextended and you're just going in so many different directions. You're being pulled at work, you're being pulled at home. If you volunteer in the community, you're being pulled that direction. And so much so that your brain just feels like it's on overload. You're always responding. You feel like your brain circuits are always firing to a point that you're just like going from task to task, conversation to conversation, problem to problem, just trying to keep up. And your brain is just so numb. And I think this is what happens when we get to a point where you can just feel like your life is out of control. You're doing everything, but life is just, as I famously say, life is living you instead of you living your life. You just feel like you're living out every day this story, this play this script that's been written, and you step in to each of those character roles every day, and you're just going through and going through, and life has become a treadmill. Some feel it's a hamster wheel, and you just don't know how to get off. Maybe it even feels like a merry-go-round. You're just going around and around and around, and you don't you just don't know how to stop it. And maybe you also just feel guilty to say no because you've been doing these things and responding to people's needs and taking care of it. It's become second nature. It's who you are. And I'm here to tell you, sis, it's nothing wrong with that. God has wired you to have a big heart. You're wired to be the go-to person. You're wired to take care of business. You're wired to be organized. You're wired to go the extra mile. Yet, if you're not careful, you will get so full, so extended that it does become overextended, overcommitted, and you feel like you don't have any control in life anymore. Although on the outside, right, you look like you're getting all these things done and you're doing everything, you're everywhere, everyone sees you, they know to come to you. Yet your cup is full. Your cup is full. If you really look at it, your cup is full. So full that if you're not careful, if it hasn't already, it's overflowed. Now, it makes me think about in Psalm 23, where the writer talks about how God blesses us so much that our cup is running over. But remember, that's God. When we create all of these things on our plate, we put all these things on our plate, you as the individual become so full that if you're not careful, that fatigue that builds up, that depletion that builds up, the lack of joy anymore. You don't have that joy because you're so overextended, so overcommitted. You're detached from the passion of it. You're not present in the moment. You just feel like you're just going from here and there, and you're not growing. You're doing, but you're not growing. And your cup is so full. And yes, you may feel like your plate is so full, right? You know, one of those plates you see at the buffet, or, or Thanksgiving, you fill your plate up. People fill their plate up so much that if you turn too fast, the food falls over. You just don't even know where to pile it up anymore on the plate. And you're trying to keep it from falling over. So if you're not careful, all of that fatigue and the emotion and potentially frustration and the depleting and the feeling of lack and control, as I have talked before, that it can turn into resentment. And then you feel guilty because you feel resentful, because you feel like, well, I'm doing what God has called me to do, is to serve and care for people because I can. And because then you feel bad if you say no. And you may be looking for some validation of worth through these these temporary feelings of accomplishment because you met someone's need. But in the midst of it, you're not growing yourself as a person. You're not growing spiritually. You're not growing emotionally and in your personal space and who God has created you as an individual, aside from all the gifts He's given you to serve and to give unto others. You're not taking care of yourself physically. All of that can build up, sis, to the point that it's almost like a plate, as I said, over that's at the brink of flowing over or falling on the floor. The food's falling out. It's a cup where you're just filling it, filling it, filling, and it's at the brink if it hasn't already overflowed. It's like that volcano, the pressure that builds up and up and up, and you're to that point that you're like, Lord, if one more person asks me to do something, if one more person says something to me, I'm going to explode. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt at work this boiling up within you that you don't even know where it's coming from? You find yourself tensing up when people come towards you, almost in fear that you're anticipating they're going to ask you to add one more thing to your plate. Your spouse or significant other, you just kind of cringe when they call your name because you're just like, okay, what are they going to ask me to do? That family member or friend that you're caring for, you do it because you want to, but yet you reach a point that you're just like, okay, what's the problem now? You're that junior matriarch in the family that now you are the guiding light of the family, and you're like, if one more person asks me one more thing. Have you even felt that if your kids come, you're just like, "Ugh." Even it can get so bad that if you look at your dogs and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm just so tired of feeding the dogs. I'm tired of walking them." Now that may sound silly, yet it's reality. As resilient women, we're prone to get a buildup of emotion because we have so much that we are doing. So I want you right now, sis, to know you're not alone. I've been there. I've been there, and I've had to learn those potential triggers and what those triggers mean so that I know, okay, you got to go take a break here. And I want to help you call it out for what it is. I don't want you feeling guilty, but you're human. You're only human. You're not meant to be God. And as I always tell my clients, my friends, my close family, you know, I look at my hands. I don't see any nail marks. I look at my feet. I don't see any nail marks. I look at my head. I don't see any thorn marks from the crown. I'm not Jesus. And sometimes as Christian women, we are trying so hard to reflect Christ, which we should do, but we're to try to model our life after Christ as much as humanly possible. That makes sense, yet not at the sacrifice of growing and resting and replenishing ourselves. And it is so important because, sis, you have to set boundaries. You have to set boundaries, which means you have to be able, as hard as it is, to start looking at your priorities. And number one should be, what has God birthed you for? And He wants you to be healthy. He wants you to be able to be the best you can be. So you have to start there in terms of what is it that you need to do to keep yourself as healthy as possible, mind, body, and soul. How do you do that? How do you keep growing so that you can have joy? And you have to set boundaries. And that means you have to stop expecting yourself to do everything. Share the wealth, let somebody else do those things that they can do. It means that you have to find a way to carve out some time to invest in some quiet, some movement. Doesn't have to be hours on end, and some time for self reflection. The first step may just be journaling, to say how you feel, to start breaking that hard shell that you have developed because of just trying to push through. I need you to do that. I need you to be selfish. You need you to be selfish. And when I say selfish, I know it has a negative connotation. And really, I don't want you to look at that like that. It's because, again, I want to restate that because selfish is usually used in a very negative connotation. And I don't want you to look at it that way. Maybe it's better to say, I want you to look at it as, what is it you need to do to replenish yourself? So, self replenishment. What do you need to do to refuel yourself? Because that's why I emphasize joy fueled. It is so important that you have some joy every day. Now, joy may not look the same every day, but there is a way to have joy every day because it allows you to put life in perspective. But to do that, you have to set boundaries so that you have the brain space, the spirit space, and the physical space to do the inner work, the mindset work, the the space to replenish yourself. You have to set boundaries. Not everyone that is in your space, needs to be in your space. And while at work, you may not have total control over everyone in your space, but there is a way to change your perspective on how you show up at work, how you can do your job without getting all entwined and, and step back and take perspective and figure out that every fire is not your fire, and not letting some of those interesting spirits at your job get in you and you get distracted for what you need to do, and having the peace in your soul to say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to let them take care of that. We've been there, done that. I'm going to let them take care of that and let them experience that. And I'm going to take care of what I need to take care of so I can get done and I can get up out of here and go home and do what I need to do. There's a way to do it. That's a part of boundaries. At home, prioritizing what needs to be done. Everything doesn't have to be done at one time. It may mean that you have to change your perspective. You may have to call out some perfectionism, call it out and say, you know what? If I don't take care of my mental, spiritual, and physical health, I'm not having joy or enjoying life. And I'm going to say this is when the Lord calls us all on, when He calls you on, you can't take all that with you. You can't take all of that perfectionism with you. Enjoy your life, enjoy your season, but you have to make space to do that. You have to make space to do that. If it's in your community, if you sit on boards of directors or you're actively involved in other areas of nonprofit, that is awesome. Or in your church, that is good. Yet sometimes you also, if you find that it is adding to your cup running over, you need to look at that. Now, you may be saying, Dr. Phyllis, what does this have to do with damage control? It has everything to do with damage control, sis, because if you don't set the boundaries now, what happens is that cup, that plate, that volcano erupts, spills over to the point it becomes resentment. You become upset because someone is asking you to do something. And then you get resentful because you feel like, well, don't they know everything I have to do? Why aren't they sympathizing or empathizing with what I have to do? Sis, because you've been doing it. I'm going to tell you, once in a while, people will create something for you to take care of yourself. But on most days, no one's going to do that. It's not because they don't care, but you have to take responsibility. And what you don't want to do is have your what maybe started out as well-intended actions by doing everything right and taking care of everyone. What started out as good stuff, you're helping people. When you cross that line that because you're so depleted and overwhelmed and fatigued and frustrated, when that pressure builds up and it crosses the line into like, Lord, if someone asks me one more thing, or if I'm asked to do one more thing, I'm going to erupt. Then you say things, you do things that you wish you hadn't done. You will look up and you will have stuff coming out of your mouth, and it's like the dam has opened and all the water is flowing out all over the land. You start reading It's the old saying, we'd say the riot act, right? It's like this long litany or message or lecture. But I'm gonna tell you, when you let those emotions build up, you will start overflowing, and it will become feelings that you've had from years ago. And some of it may be true, but some of it has taken on a life of its own. And just imagine that happens at home. Excuse me. That happens at home. It happens at work. It happens in the community. And you're sitting there going like, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And Lord forbid if it happens to your kids, your spouse or significant other, your other family members. And they will be looking at you like, what happened? And if you say things, once they come out of your mouth, if they're not positive things, there's a whole lot of damage control that has to happen. And then it just feeds into this cycle. Then you're ashamed of yourself. You feel guilty because in the moment you feel like you're speaking up for yourself. But what it is you just overflowing on emotions and fatigue, frustration, resentment that has been brewing. So we don't even want you to get there, okay? And that comes from actively making a decision today to set some boundaries. It's gonna maybe feel weird, uncomfortable, but your mind, your body, your spirit will thank you later. And you will thank yourself that you made sure that you did not let it build up to the point that you potentially hurt those that you would never want to hurt. Because I truly feel there's a lot of adults walking around that are having emotional, spiritual struggles because they had a parent or another significant adult in their life say something to them or do something to them out of a hurt place. And then those children grow up into adults and they spend their whole adult life trying to undo what was said. And since you don't want to become that person in your kid's story. So you need to set boundaries. You owe it to yourself. And you really owe it to those around you because everyone needs to stand on their own 2 feet. Our children have to learn how to stand on their 2 feet. And it's hard. We want to take care of everything. But you also want to model the behavior for your daughters, your nieces, other women coming behind you. Model the importance of setting boundaries. So this week, I want you to think about how you're feeling. Are you feeling this pressure that's building up that you just don't know where it's coming from? If you find yourself just becoming tight, afraid someone's going to ask you to do something else, put something else on your plate, or tell you something else, add some more information to your already full brain, your hard drive, then please step back for a moment and look at where it's coming from and start looking at where you can set boundaries. Because this, I want you to remember, setting boundaries is a way so that you can avoid damage control before it starts. We don't want you to have to try to clean up what you said or you did out of a place of depletion, frustration, and fatigue and overwhelm. So, what was your joy refuel moment today? I want you to take away today that you can have joy. You can have joy. You can have joy. I'm giving you a little hard time today, but you can have some joy. Why? How can you have joy? You can have joy today. You can create joy today by setting those boundaries, which will then help you create more capacity in your life, in your brain, in your spirit to replenish yourself and to decrease that pressure that you feel building up, that will also give you capacity to be more present and connected to those who you care about. And I hope you put you at the number one of that list, and it's all right. Joy comes from having a feeling of some control on what you're involved in, your level of commitment, your level of involvement. And it's all good. It's all good. I love you. And I look forward to these episodes every week. So look out for some joy today. Set those boundaries. Maybe even consider doing some journaling this week, or take a moment at least and reflect and see where you need to set some boundaries and create some capacity. Create some room in your heart, some room in your head, and get out and maybe move a little bit too. I love you. See you next week on the Joy Fueled Resilient Woman podcast. Bye for now.